Hello, hello, hello. I'm Simona Costantini, and I'm obsessed with helping you connect to your purpose and teaching you about all things mindset, business, podcasting, and everything in between. I realized I deserved and wanted more from this thing called life, so I changed my beliefs, healed my hurt, and made it my mission to help you do the same. I'm a recovering people pleaser turned life coach and podcast producer. I teach busy business owners how to confidently fall in love with their life and business and live it on their terms. On this show, you get everything raw and real, from inspirational guest interviews to deep dives into topics like life, relationships, business, purpose, growth, and mindset. I lay it all on the line every single time. Think of this as your one-stop shop to help you live a more purposeful and inspired life. This is the Happiness Happens podcast. Are you ready to hear this inspiring conversation? Let's dive on in. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode on the Happiness Happens podcast. I am flying solo this week to talk all about launching a podcast. Before we dive in, I just want to back up for 1 second. I'm really excited to be bringing you this content on here around podcasting because part of being an entrepreneur is having conversations about topics that will help your brand and your business grow. Podcasting is such an amazing reason and platform to have and help your brand and business grow. It's such an amazing tool for so many different reasons. I'm going to list you a few. Firstly, you own your podcast and you own the content that you release on there. In a world filled with social media where you're constantly creating on other platforms that other people own, this platform is for you. You have the creative rights, you have the creative directory or whatever you want to call it, and you own this content and the content that you release. So that's super important to remember. The second reason why podcasting is amazing is that you get to choose what you want to talk about and what you want to share. The third reason is that you get to make really meaningful connections and have really incredible conversations with people that you may have not even met before or even have potentially crossed paths with before. So this podcast in this episode, touches this podcast, yes, specifically, and also the entire show touches on so many topics to help you better your life and your business. So this week, we're talking about how to launch a profitable podcast. I've created a really incredible freebie that you can download, and it's called The Ultimate Guide to Launching Your Podcast in 8 Weeks. You can find the link in the show notes to snag your copy of the guide, and I promise you it's going to be so helpful in even just conceptualizing and creating what your podcast looks like and what it could look like. So head on over to the show notes, make sure you grab the freebie, and let me know what your thoughts are and how this freebie is going to be helpful for you. I created this freebie because the number one thing that I hear from my clients and from people who want to start a podcast is, where do I even start? So I've combined some of my best tips to help you really take the guesswork out of creating a podcast so that you can stay doing what you love. You can stay in creation mode. You can be talking about what you love to talk about. And what you love ultimately while you're creating your podcast is the idea of creating the podcast of your dreams. So be sure to grab that in the show notes. And I'm super excited to hear what your thoughts are on it. Okay, so this week we're chatting about how to launch a podcast. And while I can't give you all of my tips in one episode, I've broken the main ones out into 3 different categories. The first category that I want to talk about is laying the foundation. The first place that you want to start is with a strong foundation. Take the time to think about your podcast name, what you want your cover art to look like, what topics you'll be covering, and what you're going to talk about every single week. And then you're going to want to think about how often you're going to release episodes. Create that timeline of how much time in your week each of these tasks are going to take you. This is really, really, really important because podcasting takes up quite a bit of your time in your week. To edit a 1-hour episode, it takes about 2 hours. So you really want to make sure that you have your processes laid out from beginning to end and starting way before you even start creating episodes, because there's so many different things and assets and creation that you need to consider before you launch your podcast, that the stronger the foundation, the easier it will be to launch your show and the more impact you're going to have when you launch it. I do go through some of the different things that build out your foundation in my new guide. So if you're wanting a little bit more insight on that, please feel free to snag the guide in my on my website. It's in the show notes as a reminder. And then on top of that, as part of laying the foundation, I want you to think about your launch plan as well as your content creation plan. What does it look like to launch your podcast? What does it look like to create content around it? What vibe are you going for? What brand colors are you incorporating into your podcast? And I want you to think about, who are you talking to and when? Does your launch plan include, so many different assets? I'm going to touch more on the launch plan itself in a couple of seconds, so I don't want to dive too far into it right now. But laying the foundation for your systems, structures, podcast overall is so important. And you'll be so glad and grateful that you did it in the beginning without having to, wait and do it when you were halfway through and you're kind of like, okay, I'm ready to just dive in, but now I can't because I have to go back and create all of these systems and structures. Get it all done in the beginning. You're going to be so grateful that you did. The second one is knowing your audience. So podcasting is like any other social platform. You need to know who your listener is. Who are you talking to every single week? What is your listener like? What do they love? What keeps them up at night? What content of yours is so bingeable to them. And I'm going to be the first person to admit, and if you know me personally and my business personally, you're going to know that I hate niching down. I hate it. But it's so needed in order for your show to grow, for people to subscribe and to keep them coming back for more. It's so important, you guys, to know who you're talking to and to know who your podcast is for. Because your podcast is not going to be for everybody. Your podcast is for a select group of people that are going to love and dive into your content. But it doesn't mean that your podcast is for everybody, and that's okay, because you don't want to be for everybody, right? You want to be for the people who are here and excited to listen to you every single week or bi-weekly or whatever it is you want to do. And then my last point, this is a short and sweet episode today. I didn't want to draw this out because I'm a firm believer in getting the content out there in terms, instead of dragging it out longer than it needs to be. But I want to talk a little bit about having a launch plan. So it's similar to what we chatted about in the first point. I really want you to think about what your launch plan is. What marketing platforms are you launching on? Are you leveraging email? Are you warming up your email list? Are you engaging your followers? Have you created a separate Instagram account? Are you on Clubhouse hosting rooms and getting your name out there? Are you filling up your email list for people to be able to learn more about your podcast when it launches if they're not following you? Are you creating content, right? So all of these different pieces are so important because they make up what will become your overarching launch plan. Because you can just launch on Instagram if you want to, but marketing in itself has so many different components to it, right? Like you have email marketing, you have social media marketing, and then you have traditional marketing, but you have ads, which I don't really do, but at the end of the day, like all of these different pieces create what your launch plan is. And so it's really important to outline all of these different elements to make sure that you're hitting them every single time so that you're growing that audience, you're nurturing that audience, and you're creating a listenership of people who are super excited for what it is that you're going to be putting out there. So I highly recommend taking some time to map this out to make sure that you have all of your content created in advance, in place. So yeah, that it's so important to have a launch plan. So I want to recap really quick. The first one is lay the foundation. The second one is know your audience. And then the third one is have a launch plan. And I just wanted to also say that when I plan my launches for my clients, I create a 2-month launch plan because this ensures a really warm audience and lots of time to create the assets and the content that you need. I know that you'll want to launch as soon as possible, as soon as you have the idea, but I'm telling you that without the right plan in place, your launch really risks not having the kind of impact that you want it to because you haven't taken the time to nurture that audience. You haven't taken the time to think about what your plan is, what your systems are, what your structures are. And so If you're looking for more guidance on how to launch and grow and monetize, or even just manage your podcast, feel free to book a 30-minute discovery call with me in the show notes. I'm so excited to chat with you because I do consultation calls, I do VIP half days. All of my new services are launching the week that this episode is going out. So this week, so I'm really excited to be able to offer all of these different things to you and for you. And ultimately, my goal is to help you launch and grow and monetize your podcast and have a maximum impact when you do that. So let me know if you are interested in hopping on a call. I'm super excited to chat with you. Thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. Make sure that you check out the show notes this week. There's lots of great stuff in there. And let me know which tip is your fave. I want to hear from you. Tell me what you loved. And until next episode, remember that happiness happens when you're least expecting it. Well, it looks like we've made it to the end of this episode. I'm so grateful for you tuning into this week's episode, and I cannot wait to see you over on the next one. If you loved this conversation and this topic as much as I did, please feel free to leave us a rating or a review wherever you're listening. It takes just a second, and it is so important for us so that we can make sure to deliver this content to those who need it. I'm wishing you the most beautiful day wherever you are in the world, and remember that happiness happens when you're least expecting it.